Welcome back to the CPHI Festival of Pharma. We're pleased to welcome you to this panel discussion on facing the COVID-19 crisis, leadership and the future of pharma, sponsored by Roquette and in partnership with the Medicine Maker. Now let's get started with our panel discussion. And for this I'd like to introduce our moderator, Stephanie Sutton, editor of Texeri Publishing's The Medicine Maker and the Small Molecule Manufacturer brands, which focus on showcasing the pharma industry's success stories and biggest points of contention. Stephanie has been writing about the trends and technologies shaping the industry for over a decade and has been involved with the Medicine Maker since its initial launch. She has a degree in creative and professional writing and specialises in conveying the stories behind the science. Over to you, Stephanie.
Tara, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm delighted to be moderating this afternoon's session on COVID-19, leadership and the future of the pharmaceutical industry. My media brands, The Medicine Maker and the Small Molecule Manufacturer, publish engaging content digitally and in print, covering the entire spectrum of drug development. And today's panel includes 4 esteemed experts featured on The Medicine Maker's Power List, an annual list that showcases some of the best and brightest influencers in the industry. Allow me to introduce Nigel Langley from BASF Pharma Solutions, Miguel Forte from Bone Therapeutics, Cornel Stammeron from Catalent Pharma Solutions, and Bruce Levine from the University of Pennsylvania. To start with, I'm going to ask our panelists to tell you a little bit more about themselves and their background. Nigel, would you like to start?
Sure, I'm the Global Technology Director for our Pharma Solutions business at BASF. And what has COVID-19 meant to me? I think like everybody, I've had to adapt to a new way of working at home and virtually. This is from March. I'm still at home. As I usually travel a lot, this has been quite challenging at the beginning. I'm missing visiting customers. I'm missing going to conferences, the things I enjoy doing. But I think I've coped quite well to the new digital working culture. Life has been quite one-dimensional for my family and myself, especially when New Jersey was in lockdown at the beginning. So that's something about the COVID and the impact on myself personally.
And next then, Bruce, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks to the organizers and Medicine Maker for the opportunity to participate in this panel. So my background is as a cellular immunologist directing the cell and gene manufacturing facility at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm currently serving as the president of the International Society for Cell and Gene Therapy, and I think the most immediate impact has been the opportunity to meet and interact and network with colleagues. I also had a quite robust travel schedule. I now have a layer of dust on my passport instead and have been connecting in these virtual settings. So we are able to view presentations, scientific and medical conference presentations, and some of them are better at facilitating than others, but it's still that in-person networking, being introduced to someone, being able to brainstorm, that has had an impact. And we also have the impact on our daily life and our daily work and our personal at-home life. It has been substantial, and there are not only colleagues that we haven't seen, but family and friends that we haven't seen in person. So looking forward as we manage through this crisis, but it certainly is, I think, the most substantial impact of any of our lifetimes.
And then Cornel, how about you? Give us an introduction to your background and I guess how COVID-19's affected you.
Sure. So I also appreciate the opportunity here to participate. Cornel Stammeron, head of strategy for Catalent and founder and co-chair of our Applied Drug Delivery Institute. We've been working from home since March at least part of our organization has. Fortunately, we've been lucky that none of our immediate family or friends have been seriously impacted by things associated with COVID and illness and whatnot. But I think I've learned that a couple of things, but first and foremost, that I need to be more intentional about reaching out to stay connected to people in my network who I would normally encounter, again, at conferences and other places, like the other panelists have mentioned, to keep those relationships active and vibrant. Takes some extra work. So.
Mhm.
And then Miguel, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And again, thank you to the organizers and Medicine Maker to give us the opportunity to discuss this and having invited me. I'm the CEO of Bone Therapeutics, which is a cell therapy company developing MSC-based approaches currently primarily for orthopedics, but going beyond that. COVID is making sure that it's keeping us on our toes and making sure that we deliver the best out of ourselves. It is challenging, or it has been challenging, and I say it is because we're not out of it yet. But it was challenging on a personal point of view, on a professional point of view. A couple of my children had PCR positive just to give it a certain personal flavor. And on the professional side, we've been able to try to manage ongoing activities, i.e. production, working primarily from home, but continuing the daily business. And like everybody else, I think we can exchange information, but it's a lot more difficult to exchange emotion, to exchange excitement, passion, and engage person to person. Bruce was just mentioning that before. A lot of the meetings, even this one, I mean, we can and we are exchanging the information, but it would be a lot more lively, a lot more engaging if we were able to be on a stage or directly interacting with the audience and in the corridors. We have to do what we currently have to do. Let's not forget how we did it before. Let's aim to be doing it again. In the meantime, we keep the business running, we keep the activity running, and we're focused on delivering the value for the patients that we all here are involved with.
Now, Miguel, you and Bruce both work in the regenerative medicine space. So, I thought it might be interesting to discuss how this sector has fared during the pandemic, how your institutes and the ISCT has coped as well.
I'll let Bruce start.
Yeah. So thanks, Miguel. I can provide the perspective from Academic Medical Center, the University of Pennsylvania in Penn Medicine. So what's most been affected have been the research laboratories at the peak, and I should say the first peak because it looks like we're climbing up again. At the first peak, the university ordered a shutdown of all research laboratories. First, it was essential personnel, but then it was moved to less than 10% of capacity. There was also a decrease in ambulatory visits and surgical optional surgeries to make room for an expected surge of COVID patients. Now, we did have some, but fortunately did not get to the point where we exceeded the capacity of beds. There was also an effect on enrollment of clinical trials. So patients either deferred or didn't want to come in. Principal investigators didn't want to continue enrollment if they weren't sure that patients would complete the screening or show up for the administration of the agent to be tested or make the follow-up visits. And what I'm told is that the commercial chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapies were not affected. Fortunately, those were able to be maintained. But we have to recognize, even with the impact of COVID, such as it is, there are ripple effects. Not only those infected, the morbidity, the mortality, but the deferment of normal screening visits for breast cancer, colonoscopies, other visits, and there is excess mortality now, and there will be down the line. So we are now ramping back up slowly. We moved to less than 25%, then less to 50%. So we're getting back, but still not quite up to where we were in terms of the research enterprise. The ambulatory care, the surgical visits, they're about 95%, 100% of where they were. Now, moving to speak about ISCT, the International Society for Cell and Gene Therapy, we had to make a very rapid decision and pivot because our meeting was scheduled to be in Paris at the end of May. We identified a platform. We totally reconfigured our meeting from a 4-day to a 2-day virtual meeting. It was a learning experience, and we received very positive feedback. But again, some of the networking isn't what it could have been live in person in Paris. And finally, I think we've learned a lot on how to manage, how to interact by video conferencing. A lot of the clinical visits were transformed to telehealth, telemedicine. Patients will continue to participate in that. I think we'll have a lot more of these types of video-enabled meetings than we would have, but we're looking forward to getting back to the in-person. So, Miguel, what's your perspective been from Europe, not only for ISCT, but your business?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I mean, along those lines, let me start with ISCT. I've been chairing the commercialization committee up until our virtual annual meeting, and so in the initial stages of the pandemic and immediately after, there was an important forum where, as we normally do, and gather to exchange information. We took the opportunity also to exchange the information about COVID, the challenges that we were facing, and how to manage them. So again, strengthening the value of that interaction and the opportunity that ISCT is giving to their members, in this case, the industry members, to really share the experience, even in the challenging times of COVID. I actually noticed a very interesting point is that we used to do the commercialization committee meetings on the phone, but we now do them on the video. So in a way, the creeping of this technology is now becoming standard on all at-a-distance meetings. That is a plus. Let's just hope it's not the only thing that we do. And if that's the case, the plus will remain for at-the-distance meetings and when we get back to the face-to-face. Now, so the society has adapted and continues to deliver value around the challenges that we face with COVID. If I now go back to my own experience in the business here, so we had to convert everything to homework, telework, and we were able to do virtually everything that we needed to do. You know, the project team meetings, we could do them at a distance. The interactions with the regulatory authorities to get our studies approved, we were able to do at the distance. The discussions for the new products and the things, we were able to do them at the distance. What became really challenging was the activities that were dependent on interaction with other face-to-face. really, for instance, the clinical trials. Patients could not come to the hospitals. Hospitals have been kind of devoted entirely to manage COVID, and so we had to stop the studies. Fortunately, we were able to restart them, and we restarted kind of behind the pandemics. The first sites that we opened was precisely in Hong Kong, where the pandemic kind of cleared up first and was managed very, very, very actively. But nevertheless, we had an impact on our timelines. And Bruce very well pointed out the impact on the health system because patients were not going to hospital. It's published. There are published articles on increased health conditions and reduction on identifying early new oncology patients. We're seeing side effects on the overall population in terms of other diseases because of the pandemics, which is another sign of what we've seen on the studies. Now, we also had another challenge because we were producing live cells, which are our products, and we needed to maintain the process of production. We closed our research. We stopped the animal studies that we had. We stopped research that we had to do in the labs, but we could not stop the production. We were able to do shifts. We were able to implement social distancing and protective measures, and we were able to maintain. But all of that required a lot of adaptation and a lot of communication in the organization and the business. So far, we haven't had any sort of long-lasting impact, and our hope is that we'll manage the next wave in a better way, more blended way, able to continue to do the activities that we need to do and minimizing the rate of transmission.
More about how your individual companies have been affected by the pandemic and your sectors as well. BASF is obviously a supplier, Catalent's obviously a CDMO, and Cornell, you obviously do work with the Applied Drug Delivery Institute.
First, just on the last question, part of our offerings and our manufacturing network includes gene therapy and manufacturing and viral vector production, and we continued providing clinical supply and continue to do so now during this time, but also hosted a live FDA inspection in June, which may have been one of their first field inspections of the time frame, and received first FDA commercial approval for a CDMO facility for gene therapy. So that was on the regenerative medicine side. We continue to work. From a company standpoint, first and foremost, keeping our employees safe was the main priority. A portion of our, through our network of about 50 facilities, all of our facilities are developing and producing essential medicines. So they, continue to operate. But we took those people that were essential to manufacturing or operations, stayed in the facilities, and everybody else transitioned to working from home. We set up very early on a task force to figure out our operating policies and approaches, and that's been very successful and continues to operate, led by a senior executive for us. So focusing on employee safety, focusing on supplying products for patients, all of that has been has been our focus here. I would also add I'm involved with the Controlled Release Society, Drug Delivery Professional Society, and like the previous discussion, we too had to take a conference that was a live global annual meeting and convert it to a virtual session, which was a very interesting learning experience this year. hope to that returns to a live meeting at some point in the future. So that's hopefully responsive to your full question.
And how about you, Nigel?
Yeah, in some ways very similar, because BSF, as you mentioned, supplies ingredients, excipients, and APIs. And the number one priority for the company has been the safety and well-being of all its employees. Also, the priority is to keep the production running. I mean, we didn't want to be letting the industry down in that respect. And I think this is something that really has motivated the whole team in this way. I think the other general things are, how do we cope? I mean, what we tried to do proactively, and we did this, we initiated a global COVID-19 task force. And the purpose of that exercise was really just in our way, to assess the activity. And there was a lot of activity at the beginning of companies using drugs for repurposing for COVID-19 therapy, antibody treatments, and of course the development of new vaccines for this treatment. And what we wanted to try to do was to anticipate potential increases in demands for some of our ingredients, so that we could be there and meeting those demands in this case. And I think that task force was very successfully run, and it's still going on today. I say it was pretty frantic at the beginning, because there were so many things that were actually being considered globally, and we were trying to tie that all together and to understand it better. And it was a really good opportunity, I think, for us to all focus on our customer needs in a much more concerted way.
And as well, obviously, there were big challenges in keeping those supply chains running and making sure patients were getting those medicines, because there were less flights. There was less opportunity to transport things around the globe.
Yeah, that's right. That's also the other thing to consider, of course, is not just the impact of COVID, but all the shortages possibly on other drugs that would come from it. And it's been mentioned that some of the clinical trials were either being delayed or stopped. And the concern that we also were seeing were, can we keep pace with supplying to the whole industry with the uptake on the COVID-19 cases with respect to the potential therapies with the disease, and a backdrop of all working at home. We have a very large employee base. It's about 120,000 people. And that was challenging, I think, initially, to set a lot of people up from home base, and for an internet systems and connectivity, and keeping those people connected and motivated. I think one of the challenges was we had to work harder actually to communicate with people, and just to check to see whether they were doing okay, whether the stress levels were manageable, how they were coping at home, if they have families and different circumstances, and the children being at home, young children running around, for example, when they're trying to work, and also on virtual schooling. So it's a big challenge for a lot of families, and including employees' families for BSF. So the communication was very, very key. Very strong leadership, I believe, was shown. Constant communication, updates were given to the employees about the status in different countries, where we could travel, where we couldn't travel. Statistically, we obviously had people that had the infection in the company, and we tried to manage that as well. So I think that's one of the key of leadership is through a crisis or change that you have to keep communicating and really having time for people more and connecting the teams. And virtual happy hours, virtual cooking sessions, is a way to help to sort of socialize this a bit. I'm also involved in IPAC, like Cornell, with an association. We were having virtual happy hours where we weren't talking about anything to do with the association. We were just trying to connect with people on a social level, just to keep that contact going. And yeah, so things have improved since those early days, but as we say, we're still not out of this yet.
From a supply chain standpoint, early on, we also reviewed our, customers' product forecast and needs, and really reached out to our vendors for API or other key components, and made sure we had adequate visibility for inventory for the production needed for an extended period of time, so we wouldn't disrupt product supply. So that was another key area of focus for us from a supply chain standpoint. And at the same time, we're also doing significant expansions through our operational network. And so, including some that are, relevant to, providing fill finish capabilities for vaccines and other things. So we've also been working on the construction and the equipment side to make sure that those things happen on schedule or faster than originally planned, to make sure we can provide availability for our customers. So from a supply chain standpoint, it's been some extra work, but it's been worth it. So.
And in the conversation,
sorry,
go ahead,
Stephanie,
Bruce.
if I may, on the supply chain and the regenerative medicine sector, there, and in particular for gene therapy, where we use viral vectors. Many companies depend on CDMOs for viral vector manufacturing. Some smaller companies depend on CDMOs for manufacturing their cell therapy or their gene therapy. And I just wonder and I worry about the impact of vaccine manufacturing that may be going on at the CDMOs. Antibody manufacturing, does that have the impact or does that have the effect of impacting the timelines of companies in the regenerative medicine space? I think there will be, but I haven't seen any assessment of that.
So I can say, in many respects, the commercial capacity or the CGMP capacity for gene therapy are often, in dedicated suites for the companies involved, or as their products progress towards commercial. And so because of that, those dedicated suites would remain dedicated to those customers and those products. And then, any, transfection for viral vector vaccines, viral vector-based vaccines would happen would likely happen in other capacity, unless it was one of those same companies also had a vaccine and wanted to trade off between a non-vaccine based viral vector product and the vaccine. So, that's, from what I've seen and what I'm familiar with, that's would be my response. But obviously, if we're talking about development capabilities or other things, there could be some constraints.
Yeah. Just to comment on that, actually, we saw quite a bit of demand for operators and space, precisely as some of the vaccine activity ramped up, not necessarily impacting us, but clearly we saw that around us. Clearly, there's only so many hands around that can do things. We had some challenges to manage our studies and the clinical trial supplies to those studies at the distance, because during the peak of the disruption. But as we went back to reinitiating the studies, and back to some activity, namely in terms of flight and flow, we were able to normalize. We actually lost some material in one of the sites because of this. So it was not without an impact. It was a manageable impact. And if we translate that overall to the rest of the industry, I'm sure that there's accumulated significant impact all over. Just also to point out that some of those practices, we had the support of some regulatory measures trying to accelerate and short circuit within the context to make sure that some of the steps to be able to really keep up with the need. And so again, everybody got involved on trying to solve, but the impact was definitely felt and overall accumulated maybe quite significant.
And then in the previous conversations we've had, you've all talked about some of the personal challenges of handling COVID-19 and how it's affected how you work with colleagues, and how we also do conferences. When it comes to leaderships, what do you think have been the biggest challenges? What have been the challenges with interacting with your teams or leading entire companies, or in Bruce's case, the ISCT, being president of a society?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with a couple personal challenges. Our kids are out of the house, but this summer we did have 2 severe storms come through, each of which knocked out the power to our house for 2.5 days. So you can't very well do networking by video conference with no power. So we solved that problem. We had a home generator installed, and I think we're good to go. Today I happen to be in my Penn office. But in terms of ISCT, what I've tried to do is to have networking that, again, is virtual, but to reach out to our various regions. So we are a global society. We have North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and South and Central America regions. And I have requested to sit in on the executive meetings with the leadership of each of those regions to stay in touch. And we're going to be facilitating region to region interaction. In my communications to the society, I've made a point to be posting on social media to increase my access. But also, if we think about some of the bright spots of having these virtual interactions and a virtual meeting, I think it provided some significant level of democratization that is going to outlast this pandemic. And that if we had a in-person meeting in Paris, there are people around the world that would not have been able to afford the travel, the accommodations on top of the registration. We had a truly global meeting where no one region had more than 50% attendance. I think we had much more attendance from China, from India, from South and Central America than we would have for an in-person meeting. And then that's an opportunity, but again, the challenge is to maintain that engagement. And I think we're trying all of these different channels and methods. And I'm open to suggestions from anyone on the panel for things that we haven't tried that each of you has found that has worked.
One thing we try a lot actually in our company is using menti.com. I don't know if you've used that, just to get a pulse check of people. It's quite a useful tool actually to have on, you can pitch the questions however you like, but you get an instant capture of people's, whatever the questions are pitched at, you get an instant capture of that. So no, I agree, it's quite challenging to make those connections, but I think what we need to do is to use all the tools that are available. I mean, there's lots of different ways to connect, and And some of them, I think, is correct. Often meetings, global meetings, cannot be attended by everybody. And on a virtual meeting, you have that opportunity to do that. So we feel that, I think one of the positive things that comes from those tools of the technology is it's a little bit more inclusive, and you get a better representation of the regions that you're operating in. And I think that's a very good positive thing. And that will continue, I'm sure, once we get back to the pre-COVID-19 normal. I think there probably will be a hybrid way of communicating in the future. So yeah, there's lots of tools out there, and different ways, and different companies offer different ways to connect.
I would add from our perspective, and it's not just my own experience, but that of our leadership team. Over communication has been important internally to keep our employees, informed and up to date. We've gone to a model where certain senior leaders have, a weekly or bi-weekly town hall virtual that our extended leadership team can, hear both important messages, but also ask questions and have discussions on topics that are of importance. Second, I think it's become apparent that it's more showing the personal side of leaders is maybe more important. Showing emotion maybe that is sometimes harder to get through on some of these platforms is also important. And just reaching out to connect to I'll say direct reports or other people in the organization with more regularity maybe than a normal busy schedule would permit. So over communication, I think is been very important for us. So, and last, we have also been doing more things, thinking about employees, mental health, mental well-being, including bringing some outside experts in for these kinds of sessions, whether it's in these town halls or in other special sessions, just thinking about how you manage mental health in situations like this. So.
Yeah. Clearly, the important thing is to maintain the communication, because obviously everybody kind of found themselves at home with all the challenges you heard before in terms of managing their own issues, the family, the children, and at the same time no further connected with the rest of the organization. So we implemented several things. First of all, the leadership team met every day during the lockdown at 9 a.m. and we just would review the situation and also do just kind of casual chat, again to build the team spirit and keep the flow of information going. We had more town halls, again all of them virtual, but really to keep the communication. We were very strict on providing guidance to the measures to protect the employees that came in. And the thing that we felt that there was a clear missing was the impromptu meetings. When you bump into someone that you go and pick up your coffee and then you talk about the project, that impromptu discussions were no longer happening. So we forced them. We kind of crisscrossed and made impromptu discussions. I'll give you another example. Just beginning of March, I hired a new collaborator to the leadership team from the UK with the expectation that he would be commuting regularly, weekly to Belgium. In the first week, and then lockdown came, and he has been working all through that time at the distance, was able to come back in August for a week, and now is again difficult to travel. Nevertheless, even though he came in to do business development, even though he came in and performed all his function at a distance from his office home, he was able to lead discussions with potential partners. And you may have seen we've communicated a partnership with two Chinese companies just last week, and we did two full due diligences to our technology and to our processes and to our organization, all that at a distance. It's interesting that I met the persons from the organization at JP Morgan last year, and ever since then, everything was done at a distance, but we were able to nevertheless complete a partnership deal. So we're making business run, but we're not able to do that interaction. And I must say that impacted in terms of being able to build that confidence. You have to work harder at building that confidence. You have to think twice about the connection, because you don't have the easy body language to go through. Some of it goes here, but it's even a delay on the screen as you go. You miss that, but you have to overcome it. And if you do, you're able to achieve your business, or a significant proportion of your business anyway.
Despite the obvious negatives of the pandemic, there are positive outcomes for pharma companies, in terms of adopting new ways of doing things, whether it's new ways of doing events, new ways of collaborating with customers. What other new opportunities or new ways of doing things do you think are going to emerge because of the pandemic?
I think what the pandemic has showed us that collaboration is a key element of success here, and the whole industry has really been collaborating in this quest to find an effective treatment. And I think I like personally to see that extended. I think the part of business that we're in at BSF at the ingredient side, I would love in the future that we could more collaborate with our customers in the industry with respect to be considered as a partner, rather than in some cases as a supplier or a vendor as defined. So I think the collaboration aspect and pulling the industry together with a common purpose has been one thing that would be a very strong outcome from this, from the pandemic.
I think we have the opportunity of goodwill. So with focus on the virus, with focus on the public health and therapeutic development response, there has been, from what I've seen, an increase in the trust that the public has in science, public health, and in biotech. And that potentially, hopefully, can reverse some of the mistrust in vaccines, some of the mistrust that exists in terms of gene therapy. We had a very unfortunate incident in China with genome editing of babies there that was not ethically or scientifically well practiced at all. So I think we have that opportunity to further build and reinforce trust in what we do. And I think that's something that we can do in a virtual environment, but it's something that as professionals, we should consider how we reach out to the public, family, friends, neighbors, the lay public at large, patients, and the media. So that's something that I would like us as a field, as an industry, to continue to keep in mind.
Yeah, Bruce, I would second that very, very much. I think it's an opportunity, by the way the industry collaboratively responded to the challenge, while continuing to be ethical, continuing to be focused, but really being attentive and responsive to the urgency, can really improve our standing and the expectations in the public in general, and give us an opportunity. The vaccine one is one I resonate entirely. But there's a few other things that actually are positive. One is obviously the technology. We just talked about that, and I think that technology we're now all familiar with it, and we should continue to use it, and it will change the way we do things. We'll be more effective and travel less, but potentially with an impact on our environment. The other thing is it gets us to the essential as well. I think it's important to balance the casual discussions, but also be focused. And this provides also an opportunity to be to the point, focused, and business effective. And that kind of giving away the non-essential, I would point at something that I'm expecting to see more, and I think there's a huge opportunity. I mentioned before that the regulators, FDA, EMA, took some temporary positions or measures to allow fast resolutions. I'll give you one particular example. In Europe, the gene-modified GMO regulation is different from country to country, and that has always been a difficulty in terms of implementing cell and gene therapy studies across Europe, because there was an added complexity, diverse complexity across, and the European Commission kind of waived those requirements for the period, and I think that showed that we can go beyond the difficulties that we have today. That with a series of other measures to speed things, making a good risk-benefit decision and understanding that you go a bit beyond, I think is a learning that we should carry going forward and take advantage of that. This is an example, but other practices saying, okay, if we can do without this, why aren't we going to continue to do without it, provided the right risk-benefit assessment is done. So I think I was on a discussion the other day, and there was a fantastic quote from Winston Churchill, I believe, which is, "We should not let a good crisis be wasted." And I think that's what we should really consider in terms of where we are.
I would add the rapid adoption of or accelerated adoption of virtual or investigator light or investigator less, more patient focused clinical trials was happening very gradually. And I think because of the situation this year, it's really accelerated many companies' adoption of those kinds of more flexible approaches to clinical trials, and that will give more and better alternatives to patients, and may open up more population groups to participate in clinical studies over time. So I think that's a positive that'll last from this.
I think that flexibility
I think in general, people are much more aware of their own health now. I think that's what's come from this. Again, a general statement, but and the importance of medicines and effective medicines, and people feel very vulnerable if there's nothing there to help them. And I think that's something that should be really positive. There's an expectation, though, that why would not every other drug be developed as quickly as the vaccines are being developed? I think that's something that needs to be managed as well. But it's certainly the awareness has been very, very strong, I think, and the importance of the pharmaceutical industry in this disease. One hopes that the vaccine will come soon, though. I think if it's delayed and there's concerns about the various treatments and the side effects, then that's not going to be a positive thing. But that's part of research, and that's also something that people need to understand better. So.
Sorry for the interruption. It's just due to the delay here. But look, I think flexibility in clinical development is good, but we should also recognize that clinical development should occur in a scientifically validated and clinically meaningful and controlled way, where there is the impetus to have one-off compassionate use, or what we've seen as a lot of piggybacking on the term of COVID-19, where there may not be scientific justification for pursuing a pathway. There have been some companies and some groups that have been able to get approval based more on hope than based on scientific evidence. What we've also seen, unfortunately, here in the US is political influence over regulatory agency and potentially some approval pathways and in the public health apparatus. That's been quite unfortunate, but we have seen scientists and clinicians speak out with authority to counter that. One hopes that in the fog of pandemic that things will clear and that we will give more credence to those experts that are validated than those that are coming in with theories that are frankly not based in evidence and really hold back the efforts at controlling the pandemic.
Yeah, but I fully agree, Bruce. There is bad science and there is bad politics, and both of them should not be tolerable. And as I pointed out, the right risk benefit is important to be assessed, and it's very, very important that we do the development appropriately. And you know, you feel very strong about it, like I do, like the society we both belong to does. And that's really just on the science and the opportunistic. The opportunism sometimes in the science, and the same thing in politics. And that politics, to be honest, is just not. Unfortunately, is very, very obvious and very, very seen now in your side of the pond. But we've seen it here as well in terms of putting pressure on some of the vaccine development and some of the vaccine availability and vaccine exclusivity and all of that. So I think it's important that we as leaders and responsible people in this field take position. Again, opportunism in science and opportunism in politics that really dangers our image and dangers the value for patients. But it takes all colors, and I think it's part of the challenges. It's part of the speeding up. I wouldn't shy away from those challenges. I would just deal with them properly.
I would also add, since we're talking about kind of negative implications a little bit, some of the early actions by some governments to limit exports of certain APIs and kind of politicizing certain aspects of the supply chain will have some complicating effects, politically, whether it's the discussion about reshoring or other things, and we'll see where that goes. But some of those early on actions were, I would say, unfortunate as well.
I think as a final question for the panel, I'd like to ask, has the industry changed forever, or are we just waiting to go back to the old ways of doing things?
I think, Stephanie, if we haven't changed, then we wouldn't have learned anything, and it wouldn't have been good. I mean, we have to change, and I think we were pointing out on some of the things that we're unhappy to see, and some of the things we're happy to see, and the integration of that should make us better going forward. I mean, I always go back to another example, which was the HIV, which I know Bruce also shares. I mean, kind of started our careers on that, and it has been momentous what we've learned and how things have changed because of that. So the same thing needs to happen here. It will happen here, and so we should integrate all those learnings. Continue to do the things ethically, properly, well evidenced, but really addressing the needs and the environment, and take the learnings that this pandemic is giving to us, will give to us still, and translate it in doing things better, improving the industry we're all working.
Yeah, I think, look, there has been seismic change. Unless you've been living under a rock, you haven't, you have seen it. We've talked about the opportunities, we've talked about the challenges, and many of those challenges are going to be ongoing. And just think of children in school, what their view is of the world, a mask being normal, learning on a screen, take that up through college. And at our medical school, the opportunity for undergraduates to do research, the progress of graduate students' thesis projects, postdoctoral projects, that impact on training will have a long-term effect, I think, hopefully not too impactful, but I really take to heart the quote that Miguel alluded to from Winston Churchill, "Don't waste a good crisis." I happen to be reading a book now about the Blitz of London. So many good Churchill quotes you can read today for how to deal with challenges, what they dealt with in World War II, what happened in the influenza pandemic of 1918. We are so blessed to have this electronic capability. What will we do without it? How did the public deal with those post challenges? I think it was so much harder what they had to deal with. So let's just do what we can, invent what we can't do, and help those that are without the resources that we have.
So my hope is that we do learn from this experience and we take the positive things, and we continue with those. And one of the areas is in our field is around the collaboration, innovation aspect. And my personal wish is that that will continue, and we will be able to collaborate much better, all parts of the industry in the future, to develop drugs and to develop safe, effective treatments, not just for this disease, but for all the other unmet diseases that there are. And that includes the excipient companies. Let's innovate in that excipient space, and that's my plug today. I really wish that we can do that in the industry and seen as a real partner, and that's a real strong message. And I think that's possible, and I think really we have now the backdrop to do that. So let's see whether we can actually achieve that in the future.
I would build on the collaboration point as well. Given the more open collaboration on understanding of disease state and treatment options amongst innovator companies, a more open perspective to a certain extent from regulators in terms of their expectations, to the extent politics doesn't get in the way. Those more boundary-less collaboration opportunities could only help as we move forward. So.
I think it's no exaggeration to say that the pandemic is one of the biggest challenges the industry has ever faced. And I thank all of you for sharing your views and insights on your experiences so far. To all of our viewers, there will be a write-up of this panel discussion in an upcoming issue of the Medicine Maker, and you can subscribe for free at www.medicinemaker.com. Thank you again to Cornell, Nigel, Miguel and Bruce for joining me today. And thank you to CPHI for giving us the opportunity for this great discussion.
And that concludes today's session. Thank you to all of our amazing speakers for taking part, to our sponsor Roquette and our partner The Medicine Maker for their support, and of course to you, our audience, for your attention.